The evening settles over the small frontier town like a thin, dusty blanket, soft enough to dim the sun, yet heavy enough to press down on anyone already carrying burdens. The streets are quieter than usual, though a low hum pulses from the saloon at the town center. Laughter spills out through swinging doors, accompanied by the sour scent of whiskey and the shrill scrape of a fiddle that's seen better days. Under that golden, flickering lamplight, life inside feels warm and full, but outside, shadows stretch long, revealing a harsher reality. Behind the saloon, where the lantern glow can't reach, a widowed mother named Mara Ellsworth kneels on the dry dirt beside her two children, Eli and Rose. The younger one, Rose, clings to her mother's skirt as Mara sifts through discarded food scraps. Stale bread, half-gnawed bones, wilted vegetables, things others would grimace at, but for them, these leftovers mean survival. Each piece Mara picks up, she inspects carefully before placing it into a small cloth sack already nearly empty. She whispers quick, encouraging words to her children, though her voice trembles. Weeks of hunger have hollowed their cheeks and dimmed their once bright eyes. Their clothes are thin and worn, mended more times than the fabric can handle. Eli tries to act brave, insisting he isn't hungry, but his stomach growls loudly, betraying him. Still, he keeps watch like a little soldier, alert to any sign of trouble. Shame has become a familiar companion, but desperation pushes them forward. The world hasn't been kind to them since. Mara's husband died in a ranching accident nearly a year ago. With no savings, no family nearby, and no man to vouch for her, Mara quickly found herself at the mercy of a town that believed widows should be someone else's burden. Jobs were scarce, wages unfair, and gossip cruel. Bit by bit, the family slipped from struggling to destitute until now, all they have left is each other and the thin hope that tomorrow might somehow be kinder. While Mara searches the ground, a steady rhythm of approaching footsteps interrupts the silence, a man's boots, scuffed and caked with trail dust. She stiffens instantly, instinctively pulling her children close. People rarely came back here for good reasons. The man who steps into view is Tanner Briggs, a cowboy known across the valley, though few know much about him. Tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying the weary silence of someone who's seen too much of the world, Tanner had just finished a week-long cattle drive. He had wandered toward the saloon hoping for a warm meal and a cold drink before bedding down somewhere quiet. But what catches his attention isn't the music inside or the murmured poker games. It's the sight of the small family stooped over refuse, their silhouettes sharp against the setting sun. Tanner stops mid-stride. Something inside him tightens, something old, something painful. He has seen hardship before. He has lived it. But watching children dig through trash strikes him deeper than he expects. For a moment, Tanner simply stands there, observing. Mara notices him watching and quickly lowers her head, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She mutters an apology, though she owes him nothing. Eli takes a protective step in front of his sister, though he's barely 9 years old. Tanner raises his palm slightly, signaling he means no harm. The scene unfolds without words at first, an unspoken understanding drifting between them. Tanner's gaze softens as he takes in the thinness of the children's arms, the trembling force in Mara's hands as she tries to hide their suffering. He can see they are proud, even in the face of despair. That pride, more than anything, unsettles him. These are not beggars by nature. They are people pushed to the edge. Inside the saloon, drunken laughter crescendos as someone wins a hand of cards. The sound feels jarringly out of place next to the silent misery happening just outside. Tanner looks toward the swinging doors, then back at the family. A spark of indignation rises in him, slow, steady, and undeniable. In that moment, Tanner Briggs makes a quiet but life-altering decision. Not for praise, not for reward, Not out of pity, but because no one, least of all a widow, and her children should have to live like this, and because somewhere deep within him, a memory of his own past pain whispers, do something, don't walk away. This is where the story truly begins on a dusty evening behind a saloon, with a cowboy who can't ignore suffering and a family who has nearly forgotten what hope looks like. Asterisk the silence between Tanner and the struggling family lingers for several long moments, heavy enough to feel like another weight pressing against Mara's already burdened shoulders. She keeps her eyes down, struggling to hide the shame that threatens to spill over. She hates being seen like this, reduced to picking through scraps like an animal, but hunger has a way of grinding a person's pride into dust. Tanner kneels slowly, careful not to startle the children. He doesn't speak right away. Instead, he studies the situation, the fraying edges of Mara's dress, the deep worry lines carved into her face, the way Eli stands guard with a protective fierceness far beyond his years. Rose clutches her mother's arm, her tiny frame trembling from cold and hunger. These signs tell Tanner more than Mara's words ever could. When he finally speaks, his voice is low and steady, free of judgment. "Ma'am," he begins softly, "you don't need to explain a thing." Mara stiffens. She shakes her head quickly, her voice barely a whisper. "We're fine. Just gathering what we can. It'll do for now." Tanner doesn't buy the lie. He sees the children's hollow eyes that have known far too much fear and far too little comfort. He remembers those eyes from his own childhood, when drought stole everything his family had, leaving them scraping for survival. It's a memory he rarely revisits, but tonight, standing before this broken family, the past becomes impossible to ignore. He stands abruptly, brushing dust from his knees. Mara tenses, assuming he'll leave. People usually do. They either look away or mock them for their desperation. But Tanner's boots turn not toward the road, but toward the saloon's front door. Inside, the atmosphere is loud and thick with smoke. Men crowd around tables, arguing over poker hands and sloshing whiskey across wooden planks. A barkeep polishes a glass with a rag that does little more than spread the dirt around. When Tanner enters, the room quiets ever so slightly, not out of fear, but respect. Tanner Briggs isn't known for trouble, but he's known for not tolerating it either. He strides to the counter, reaches into his coat, and places a handful of silver coins on the bar. The barkeep's eyebrows lift. Not many men in this part of the territory toss down that kind of money without hesitation. "I'll need meals," Tanner says simply. "Hot ones. Enough for a family." "A family?" The barkeep repeats, confused. Tanner isn't married, and he certainly didn't walk in with anyone. Tanner doesn't explain. He simply adds, "Now." The barkeep swallows, nods, and rushes off. Tanner waits, arms crossed, ignoring the curious stares. When the food is ready still, steaming, smelling of roasted meat and fresh bread, Tanner gathers it all in his arms and heads outside. He returns to the alley where Mara and the children sit in the dirt. Mara stands quickly when she sees him, unsure whether to flee or thank him. Tanner kneels again and places the food gently before them. "Eat," he says. Mara hesitates, hands hovering over the plates but not touching them. "Sir, we can't repay. This ain't about repayment," Tanner interrupts. His tone is firm but warm. "It's about feeding hungry children." Eli's eyes flick to the food, then to his mother. Her nod gives him the permission he desperately needs. The children begin eating with cautious desperation, quick but careful, as if fearing the meal might disappear if they blinked. Mara, however, holds back. Tanner notices. "You should eat too," he says. She swallows hard, embarrassment burning her cheeks. "Let the little ones eat first." Tanner shakes his head slowly. "You can't take care of them if you're starving yourself." For a moment, Their eyes meet her exhaustion, his quiet determination. Something softens in her expression. She sits down and takes a small bite, savoring it as if she hasn't tasted real food in months. Perhaps she hasn't. While they eat, Tanner settles nearby, arms resting on his knees. He doesn't pry. He doesn't offer pity. He simply shares the space with them, as though this moment belongs to them all. Gradually, Mara speaks. "My husband passed last winter," she says quietly. "Work's been scarce since. Folks around here, they don't care much for widows with mouths to feed." Her voice cracks, but she forces herself to finish. "We're doing the best we can." Tanner nods slowly, absorbing every word. Her story echoes pieces of his own past loss, struggle, the cold indifference of strangers. He watches Eli tuck a piece of bread into his pocket for later. He watches Rose lean against Mara's shoulder, finally full enough to relax. Something settles in Tanner's chest, not pity, but a firm, unshakable resolve. He knows now that simply feeding them isn't enough, that they need safety. They need stability. They need someone who won't walk away, and Tanner Briggs, for reasons he can't yet explain, knows he's meant to be that someone. This moment, this quiet exchange over shared food, marks the beginning of a choice that will change all their lives. The last trace of sunlight fades behind the town's crooked buildings, leaving the alley wrapped in a cool, settling dusk. The only light now is the faint glow from the saloon windows, their warmth unable to reach the little family huddled on the dry ground. But the warmth of the food in their hands food Tanner had placed there without hesitation has softened the sharp edge of their fear. Eli and Rose finish eating slowly, savoring every bite like it's a treasure. Rose licks her fingers, embarrassed but too relieved to stop herself. Eli wipes crumbs from his sister's face while pretending he isn't still hungry. Mara's heart aches at the sight, yet for the first time in weeks, she doesn't feel completely hollow. The simple act of someone caring, someone noticing, feels almost unfamiliar. Tanner sits a short distance away, elbows braced on his knees, eyes steady on the ground. He isn't looking at them directly, but he sees everything. Every trembling inhale. Every glance Mara steals at her children to make sure they're still there, still safe. Every sign of exhaustion she tries so hard to hide. He senses the quiet desperation that has followed them like a shadow. He also senses something else, memory creeping up from the corners of his mind, unwelcome yet unavoidable. Years ago, Tanner had watched his own family crumble under a drought that ravaged the plains. He remembered the hunger, the long days when pride kept them from asking for help, and the nights his father walked miles trying to find work that didn't exist. He remembered the look in his mother's eyes, the same look he sees now in Mara's, a mixture of fear, determination, and unspeakable grief. Tanner's jaw tightens. He forces the memories down, but they refuse to disappear. They settle instead alongside something new, a stirring of purpose. Mara looks up at him quietly, unsure of what to say. She's used to people offering temporary kindness, but temporary kindness doesn't change anything. It just gives you enough strength to keep suffering. "Thank you," she finally whispers. Tanner shakes his head. "Don't thank me for feeding hungry kids. That's just what's right." But Mara doesn't see it as simple. People have looked the other way for months. If doing right were easy, someone would have done it before now. She folds her hands tightly, unsure how much to reveal. Tanner doesn't pressure her. He lets the silence sit, comfortable as an old friend. The wind picks up, carrying the distant sound of boots clapping along the wooden boardwalk. Mara flinches. The town hasn't been kind. Children tease Eli. Shopkeepers shoo them away. Men smirk knowingly at the sight of a widow alone. The world has slowly taught her that she is invisible unless she is in someone's way. Tanner senses her fear. Not of him, but of everything else. Of tomorrow, the next day, the next hungry night, He exhales slowly, deep and steady, as if anchoring himself before saying what's been forming inside him since the minute he saw her kneeling in the dirt. He rises to his feet and dusts off his coat. His boots crunch softly on the dry earth. Mara looks up, expecting him to leave now that he's done his good deed. Instead, Tanner steps closer. "Gather your things," he says quietly. Mara blinks, confused. "Our things?" "Whatever you've got, however little it is. Pick it up." Eli stands quickly, sensing a shift. Rose clings to Mara's skirt again. Mara's voice trembles with uncertainty. "Why? Where are we going?" Tanner meets her eyes, hard, steady, filled with a sincerity she isn't used to receiving. There's no pity in his gaze, only resolve. "Because you don't deserve this life," he says. The words land heavy and warm, like a blanket placed over shivering shoulders. Mara's breath catches. She shakes her head slowly, trying to understand. "We don't even know you." "You don't need to," Tanner replies. "You just need a chance. And I've got a place where you and your young'uns can start fresh. A real roof. Real meals. Real work if you're willing." Mara's heart pounds. The idea of trusting a stranger feels reckless, but continuing like this feels impossible. She glances down at Eli and Rose. Their faces, still smudged with dirt but soft from a rare full meal, tell her everything she needs to know. They can't survive this life much longer. Tanner doesn't push. He simply waits, patient, quiet, but unwavering. His posture says what his words don't. "I won't walk away." Not this time. A long moment passes before Mara nods slowly, tears threatening to spill. "All right," she whispers. "We'll go." And in that moment, with dust swirling at their feet and the night settling over the town, a widow, her children, and a lone cowboy take the first step toward a future none of them expected. The night air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush as Tanner leads Mara and her children away from town. The dim lantern light behind them flickers like a final reminder of the life they're leaving, one built on struggle, humiliation, and uncertainty. Ahead, a vast expanse of open plains stretches into the darkness, quiet and intimidating, yet holding a strange, gentle promise. Mara walks with careful steps, Rose's tiny hand clasped tightly in hers while Eli trails close behind, trying to appear brave but glancing back toward town every few seconds. Everything they've known remains behind them, even if what they've known has been mostly pain. But stepping into the unknown with a stranger requires a courage Mara is surprised to find within herself. Tanner walks steadily at the front, guiding his horse with one hand. The animal snorts softly, as though sensing the change in its new companions. Tanner doesn't speak much, but his silence feels reassuring rather than cold. He carries himself with a calm certainty, like a man who has made up his mind and won't be swayed. After several minutes of walking, Tanner stops and looks over his shoulder. "You can ride with me," he says gently, nodding toward the horse. "Little ones be warmer off the ground." Mara's instinct is to refuse. She doesn't want to be a burden, but Tanner's expression is steady, patient. With a hesitant nod, she lifts Rose first. Tanner offers his hand, lifting the girl easily onto the saddle. Eli follows, trying not to look too eager, but the relief in his eyes is unmistakable. Mara climbs up last, settling behind them. Tanner grips the reins, walking beside the horse to keep the pace slow and safe. The plains stretch before them in rolling waves of moonlit grass. The distant chirping of crickets fills the silence, broken only by the rhythmic clop of hoofbeats. Slowly, the tension in Mara's body begins to ease. She watches Tanner from above, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the night sky, his hat shadowing his face, his stride steady and confident. This man, this stranger, had stepped into their lives only hours ago, but his presence feels strangely grounding. As they move farther from the town's lights, something like hope flickers inside her chest. After a while, she speaks. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice is cautious but sincere. Tanner doesn't answer immediately. He keeps his eyes on the horizon, the stars reflecting faintly in his calm gaze. "Seen too many folks suffer," he finally says. "Seen what it does to a soul, especially kids. Thought maybe I could keep you from going through more of it." Mara swallows hard. His answer is simple, but it carries a depth she can't quite reach. She studies him quietly, wondering about the ghosts he carries. She senses there's more to his kindness than what he's saying, but she doesn't press. She knows what it's like to hold pain close, guarding it like something fragile. The journey continues, and little by little, the children begin to relax. Eli leans against Rose, both of them growing sleepy from the warmth of the horse and the gentle sway of the ride. Mara wraps her arms around them, creating a cocoon of comfort she hasn't felt in months. Every so often, Tanner glances up at them, checking their comfort without a single word. Each time, Mara notices, and each time, something inside her loosens, like a knot beginning to unravel. Hours pass before the first signs of dawn begin to touch the sky. Soft pink hues slip across the horizon, revealing the outline of distant hills. Tanner stops near a cluster of cottonwoods by a shallow creek. "We'll rest here for a bit," he says, tying the horse to a low branch. Mara helps the children down. They stumble slightly, still sleepy, but their small smiles warm her heart. Tanner kneels by the creek, cupping water into his hands and offering it to them first. The sunlight reveals the quiet gentleness in his movements, intentional, humble, and without expectation. While the children drink and wash their faces, Mara stands beside Tanner. "You didn't have to do any of this," she whispers. He looks up at her, and for the first time since they met, she sees a flicker of old grief in his eyes. "No," he agrees softly, "but someone should have done it sooner." His words settle around them like a soft wind. Mara feels her throat tighten, but this time it isn't from fear or exhaustion. It's from the unfamiliar but comforting realization that she is no longer alone. As the sun rises, warming the plains with golden light, the small family and the lone cowboy continue their journey. Each step forward carries them farther from suffering and closer to something they barely dared to imagine. A life worth living, a future with promise, a beginning born from a stranger's compassion. The sun climbs higher as Tanner, Mara, Eli, and Rose finally approach the valley that Tanner calls home. The land seems to open its arms to them, rolling green fields stretching wide, dotted with grazing horses and fenced pastures that shimmer beneath the afternoon light. Compared to the dusty, unforgiving town they left behind, the valley feels like an entirely different world, gentler, fuller, alive. Mara watches the scenery with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She hadn't truly allowed herself to imagine what Tanner's place might look like. She expected something rugged, lonely, maybe a small shack tucked into a hill. Instead, the ranch unfolds like a quiet sanctuary. A sturdy barn stands to one side, its red paint weathered but lovingly maintained. A large corral lies nearby, and several ranch hands move about with a sense of purpose, fixing fences, brushing horses, hauling feed. They move with ease, joking with one another and shouting greetings across the fields. Their laughter drifts through the wind, warm and inviting. And then there's the farmhouse, a modest but comforting structure with a wraparound porch, and windows that glow softly even in daylight. Smoke curls from the chimney, carrying the scent of wood and something cooking, something that smells like home. Tanner stops a few paces ahead and lifts a hand. "Welcome," he says, turning back to them. "This here, it's all yours now, for as long as you need it." Mara's breath catches in her throat. Eli stares wide-eyed. Rose grips Mara's skirt, peering at the house as though afraid it might vanish if she blinks. A ranch hand named Cal, a grinning man with sandy blonde hair and a gentle drawl, approaches Tanner. "Boss," he calls out, wiping his hands on his trousers, "thought you'd be back tomorrow." "Plans changed," Tanner replies simply. Then, with a nod toward the family, he adds, "This here is Mara and her little ones. They'll be staying with us." Cal's smile doesn't falter. "Well, ain't that fine news? Glad to have you all here." His voice is kind and free of judgment, something Mara hasn't heard from a stranger in a long time. Inside the house, warmth greets them instantly. The wooden floors creak softly beneath their feet. A large table sits at the center of the kitchen, wide enough to seat a group far larger than the three of them. A pot simmers on the stove, filling the air with the scent of herbs and stew. Tanner removes his hat out of respect. "You're welcome to anything you need," he says, looking directly at Mara. "There's an extra room for you and the little ones. It's not fancy, but it's warm." Mara feels overwhelmed, her emotions swirling so quickly she struggles to contain them. A place to sleep, a place to eat, a roof that doesn't leak, walls that don't feel cold or hostile. She hasn't had these things in so long that the sight of them draws tears. She desperately tries to blink away. "You're giving us too much," she whispers, her voice cracking. "I ain't giving," Tanner corrects gently. "Just sharing what I've got." His humility knocks the breath from her chest. Eli and Rose explore the room. Tanner shows them two small beds, clean quilts, a wooden wardrobe, a window overlooking the pasture. Rose climbs onto the quilt, her face glowing as she bounces gently, testing its softness. Eli runs his fingers along the carved headboard, admiring the craftsmanship as though it's a priceless treasure. Mara watches her children with a trembling smile. For the first time in months, she sees something in their eyes she thought had been lost forever: light. Over the next few days, life begins to settle into a new rhythm. Rose spends mornings helping Mrs. Hawthorne, the ranch cook, who teaches her how to fold dough and flavor soups. The older woman treats the girl like a granddaughter she never had, offering gentle guidance and soft hugs that make Rose beam with joy. Eli, meanwhile, gravitates toward the horses. Cal shows him how to brush them, how to speak softly so they trust you, how to feed them without fear. Tanner watches these interactions from a distance sometimes, his expression unreadable but undeniably tender. Mara takes on chores around the ranch without being asked. She washes dishes, sweeps floors, helps Mrs. Hawthorne gather herbs, and assists wherever she can. She does it not out of obligation, but out of a growing desire to belong, to contribute to this place that has given her more security in one day than the town gave her in a year. And Tanner finds himself smiling more. He comes back from the fields eager for conversation, checks on the children before sundown, and shares quiet moments with Mara on the porch in the evenings, moments filled with soft conversation and unspoken understanding. Bit by bit, the ranch transforms from a stranger's land into something precious, a home, a refuge, chance to heal. And though Mara doesn't fully realize it yet, Tanner isn't just saving them, they're saving him too. Morning arrived on the ranch with a softness Eleanor had never felt before. Sunlight washed over the land in gentle strokes, painting the fields in shades of gold that looked almost unreal. For the first time since she could remember, she woke up to the sound of laughter, her children's laughter, echoing from the hallway. No growling stomachs, no cold floors, no fear of what the day might demand from her. She sat up slowly, letting herself breathe in the quiet comfort of the small but warm room Luke had prepared for them. Fresh sheets, a real bed, and a sturdy wooden dresser, simple things that felt like luxuries. For years she had lived day by day, surviving rather than living. Now, for the first time, she felt something unfamiliar but welcome. Steadiness. Downstairs. Luke was already up, pouring fresh coffee and flipping biscuits on the stove. He moved with the ease of someone who was used to long mornings and hard days, but there was a new lightness in his step. Seeing Eleanor and her children in the kitchen doorway brought a smile to his face, not a forced or polite smile, but one that spoke of genuine relief. As if he'd been waiting for them to appear, for this to become routine. "Morning," he said, his voice warm and steady. "Hope you're hungry." Her youngest, Clara, darted forward first, wrapping her arms around Luke's leg before he could react. He froze for a moment, startled, then gently rested his hand on her back, a small gesture that said more than words ever could. Breakfast was quiet but peaceful. The children ate with slow, steady bites, still unused to having enough food to savor it. Eleanor watched them, her heart pulling tight in her chest. She felt an overwhelming gratitude, not just for the food or the shelter, but for the dignity being restored to her family. After breakfast, Luke took them out onto the porch. The land stretched endlessly around them, rolling fields and grazing horses, the distant barn standing like a promise. The crisp air carried the scent of earth and freedom. Eleanor stood beside Luke, her shawl fluttering, while the children ran across the yard, laughing without restraint. "This is yours now," Luke said quietly. She turned to him, startled. "Luke, you've already given us more than we could ever repay." He shook his head. "This isn't about debt. This is about giving you a life you were meant to have. A place where your kids can run free, where you can breathe without fear." Eleanor felt tears push at the corners of her eyes. For so long, she had carried the weight of survival alone. Now, standing beside Luke, she realized she didn't have to anymore. Over the following days, life began to settle into rhythm. Luke taught the boys how to feed the horses and mend small fences. Clara followed him everywhere like a shadow, and he took each question she asked with patience. Eleanor helped in the kitchen and garden, discovering a quiet joy she hadn't known she missed. But the biggest change was Luke himself. He had always lived a solitary life, believing it simpler, safer. Yet now he found himself listening for the sound of small footsteps down the hall, waiting for Eleanor's soft voice in the evening, catching himself smiling at the smallest moments, Clara braiding a horse's mane, Thomas practicing his whittling, Eleanor humming while folding laundry. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, casting a warm glow across the porch, Eleanor stepped outside to find Luke leaning against the railing, staring thoughtfully at the fading sky. "You've changed everything for us," she said softly. He looked at her, his expression gentle. "You deserved a chance. That's all I did, gave you the start you should have had." Eleanor moved closer, her voice trembling with sincerity. "Luke, you didn't just give us a start. You gave us hope." He swallowed hard, emotion tightening his features. "You gave me something too, a reason to come home." They stood together in the quiet hush of twilight, no longer strangers bound by circumstance, but two souls who had found, against all odds, a place to belong. The ranch was no longer just Luke's land. It was their home, a promise, a new beginning, one born from kindness, courage, and the simple, powerful belief that every life, no matter how broken, deserves a chance to rise again.